G'day, I'm James. This is the Australian opinion on Formula One here at the Lakeside Drive F1 podcast. Yes, you've ditched the typical British bias and you've found some good old Australian bias for you to shout loudly about at us. Coming up in this episode, we review the Imola Grand Prix, including our favourite Discord comment of the week moments, some callers to the show for the first time, and of course, our full team-by-team analysis. So let's get into it. And I'm joined by my friends and yours, Freya Brolsma. Hello, mate.
Hello. Very glad to be here.
Good. And Thomas J. Camp himself. Hello, friend.
Good morning, my two favourite people in the whole wide world and the listeners. How are you?
Take that, Bridie. And anyone else related to TJC. Yes, Emilia-Romagna. What a wonderful, wonderful place. F1 has managed, for some reason, to stack two incredibly boring races back-to-back and two incredibly exciting qualifying sessions back-to-back in Emilia-Romagna and Monaco. We heard plenty of exciting things leading up to this race, including Ferrari upgrades and how it would bring them closer to Red Bull. Turns out that was just the media reporting that. It wasn't actually real. And Oscar Piastri said he's very bored with this racetrack because the DRS zone is too short. Also, Harry Benjamin, a breath of fresh air, and a really, really terrible rendition of the best Anthem in the world. I was going to cut the Anthem review, but I have to put it in because for some reason they used MIDI like idiots. Campy, let's start there.
I thought it was adorable having the children's choir. Who could go wrong with a bunch of young kids singing an anthem?
The kids were fine. The backing track was shithouse.
Yeah, it was. But hey, they went safe this time. I think for Monza, it's going to be good.
Great. So they've made this one more shit so they can make Monza better. Why have a live person playing a beautiful violin? The children fine, whatever. I don't care about that sort of stuff. But having cheap MIDI music backing track, it's like, oh no, we've forgotten actually that we need to have a backing track for the anthem and a violin isn't enough for all the children. Let's just search free epidemic sounds to try and get something. It was shithouse, Campy. Absolutely
sometimes
terrible.
Maybe good, sometimes maybe shit, Jim.
There you go. Well, the good will be Monza. The shit is here. Freya, Harry Benjamin stepped into the commentary box. Some of you in the Discord asking where he comes from. He has come from a long line of doing a lot of commentary work over the last couple of years, but you may have heard him on BBC Radio 5 Live. Sky Sports Kids, I think he's the adult in that broadcast, or one of them. And he's been doing, I think for the last 2 years, Drive to Survive, the background commentary thing that they add in over the top. But how did you think he went this weekend, Freya?
I think he smashed his debut for F1 commentary. If you think about the fact that we're so used to the same voices every weekend, such that a change can feel really jarring, it didn't feel jarring. It felt really complimentary and a breath of fresh air. And I think alongside Karun Chandrock, who I have to say this was not his best commentary effort from my opinion, it actually made him look even better. I think he just picked up on some really good points. He helped to kind of direct the conversation in positive ways, and he sounded like a lead commentator. You know, if you think about the fact this is his first F1 debut, obviously he's done heaps of other work in the lead up to this moment. But having him from the get-go, right as we get that panning shot of Imola and that beautiful scenery, it was his voice. So I was like, wow, he's really taken the lead on this. And I think he did a really great job.
Yes. Just to be clear, he has done other F1 rounds. This is just his first Sky one, if you're listening.
Yes.
He has also done some F1 TV commentary. And the man is incredibly lovely. The man is incredibly tall. So tall. The commentary box, not tall. I messaged him just before, I haven't heard back. How many times did you hit your head on the fluorescent light that was above you? And I think many. Also, Karun's mic didn't work for the first couple of minutes. So Harry, did a lead commentary and just carried the whole thing. Also, he went to RADA, which Royal Academy of Dramatic Art. So the guy can do things. It's nice. It is, for me, it's a nice change of things to come, because finally we're starting to get a glimpse of what the next generation looks like for broadcasting. All right, let's go immediately, shall we, to our Discord comment of the week. I'm going to start with Thomas J. Camp to put him immediately under pressure.
Well, I did do it this week, and this one's a bit different. But Jono posted a video from YouTube on.
Why are you
on
incapable of just picking a comment?
No, I
that
can't.
you read? Like, can't.
He did his homework so far in advance. This video was posted 3 days ago.
It was amazing. So there's a quote in this video. It's by Rocket Powered Mohawk, and it says, Lance Stroll has the spatial awareness of Stevie Wonder, who caught a following microphone, which is very suspicious. I can attest to you, listener, that when I heard that, I was on the floor laughing my guts out. My wife walked into the room and said, "What the fuck is wrong with you?"
Well, let's well done,
too
Jono.
good.
Next week we might actually pick some words that someone's put out rather than sharing content. Freya?
In this segment of Campy describing things, mine went to, I actually don't know how to say the Discord name, but it's BMW GSA. Someone tell me about that. But he said, Red Bull aren't going to swap places with you, Lord Lando. And it was right when Lando was starting to make his way up and Max was there, and you're starting to hear from Lando saying, I don't have any pace. And it was a suggestion that, the next request would be to do a little swapsy with the car in front of him. So well done to BMW GSA. That was hilarious.
Mine sadly goes to Ross again because it's just he is on it.
He's a
I think
superstar.
also losing sleep with new child helping him to become more sarcastic. On the battle for the lead, where I said it's good for the sport, I don't really mind who it is chasing down Max because it's nice to actually have that battle. He said, fuck the sport. It's bad for my mental health to hear the on-air, I won't say the last word, love fest from Sky F1.
The first line of that had me in stitches. Ross is becoming more and more unhinged, just quietly. Like you said, I think it is the sleep deprivation, but it is, there's sheer quantity in there of comments, so he's got to have some good ones in there somewhere, I suppose. But
yes, that's right.
really, really contributing at exceptional
Sign him up.
levels.
All right. Let's briefly take a look at your predictions from last week's episode. Freya, your front row was Max and Leclerc. And look, fair enough. Ferrari made a lot of noise. Well, no, Ferrari didn't make a lot of noise. We, the media, made a lot of noise on Ferrari's behalf. What a surprise. Podium was Max, Norris, Leclerc. Give yourself a pat on the back.
Yeah.
10th was Stroll. That's
Not far off. He was in 9th.
Last, Ocon, and you bowled Albon top 10. Well, that was incredibly wrong.
He did get a
That's why it's
10-second
bold.
penalty. It's kind of like top 10
10 second
seconds.
penalty.
I don't know. Yeah.
Campy, your front row was Max and Oscar, which was correct and should have been how it started. Your podium was Max, Oscar, and then Leclerc, which also would have been correct, I think, if given the opportunity, but that's okay. 10th, Albon, no good. Last, Gasly. That could have been predictable. Bold, both Mercedes out under racing conditions. And if you say out, you mean out in no man's land, because that's what they kept saying about where they were, not only in the championship, but also on the track. Then you'd be right. And I didn't do any because I wasn't here. So well done, Freya Brolsma, finally getting it right.
Yeah.
I think that's we should retire that segment there. So you retire
How convenient
on top
for you.
You retire on. No, you win.
Right.
You can win. That's it. Congratulations. We'll do what I didn't do with Campy, which is to continue the F1 fantasy team name competition, which we'll do that later, of which he's still not beating me. There is a hint. Let's go through now, shall we? And start with the very back of the pack with someone who didn't actually qualify and then came 17th, and the other driver who did qualify and then didn't actually finish the race. Yes, talking about Williams, Logan Sargent had to ask the stewards for permission to race Campy. And then he beat his teammate by default. Albon obviously not finishing after having a terrible, terrible time. Williams had a fantastic heralding moment. They've signed Alex Albon coming into this weekend, and then he shit the bed.
Yeah, not a great weekend for Williams. I don't really know what to say about. I mean, they stuffed up the pit stop and his wheel was apparently loose. He drove around he did a whole lap of the Grand Prix at basically half speed for safety reasons. Not good. Sargent, nowhere this weekend. No pace. Did hold Danny Rick up for a while, which was frustrating. But just the nature of this track and the way that the strategies worked out, I don't think it was indicative of his real pace. But yeah, they were no man's land. They got to pick up. They got to lift for the coming races. What do we got up next? Monaco. So good for the organisation to sign Albon. He played with the media a bit in the last couple of weeks. Said, I'm not sure if I'll sign with Williams, blah, blah, and then came out and got the 2-year extension. I think it's good for him. He'll be definitely, after this 2-year period, looking to sign with a bigger team or move somewhere. Just so he's established himself now as one of these drivers that will be on the grid for the next 10 years. So he'll want to make some moves up that grid at some stage. So
yeah. The thing I think, Freya, with Albon specifically is where else can he go? He ain't going forward, and anything else is a sideways or backwards step. Better the devil you know. I think from what I understand, he was chasing Sergio Perez's seat. He's already done that once, and Mercedes weren't really that interested in him. But for the Grove outfit, it's not a bad bit of news. And I think it could be a better bit of news depending on who they end up putting next to him for next year.
Yeah, definitely. And look, I think it is probably a better outcome for Williams than it is for Albon for the reasons that you've already described. But everybody who works with him speaks so highly of him, not just in terms of his capability as a driver, which we don't see every weekend, but we see kind of at weekends where their car is well suited to track and he has opportunities. He seems to be there to take them for the most part. Obviously, he has some off weekends just like everybody else. But, you know, I know I've told this story before, but listening to Jenson Button at Goodwood last year, and people were asking him who he would put in his Formula One team. And he said, I know I'm associated with Williams, but genuinely Albon, in terms of his ability to rally the team, his positive but professional attitude, his leadership qualities, and his ability to bring everybody together in a team like that with where it's at from a development perspective. I think with James Vowles obviously still trying to bring them up in terms of their processes and, you know, the quality of everything that's going on. He's a really good match for the team, even though I'm sure he'd prefer to be in a car which has greater potential.
Let's talk about Sauber now. Valtteri Bottas and Zhou Guanyu both having a no good, very bad time in Imola too. Bottas out-qualified Zhou, 16 and then 17th for Zhou. He then finished the race, though, behind in 18th. Zhou finishing in 15th. Campy, this outfit, two drivers who aren't wanted by the team for next year starting to show a little bit, I feel, even though with about 400 races to go this season.
Yeah, look, no man's land. They need to be in front of the RB and the HAAS. They're probably their direct competition. I think they're better than the Williams on track. But they just can't seem to get those positions in qualifying in front of them. And when they do, something happens. Again, this weekend, it's not a track that produces opportunities to pass a lot of the time. And if you are not, what we've seen from those teams from 6th back to 9th, if you're not doing a Yuki Tsunoda and getting and qualifying ahead, or doing a Hulk and making the passes off the start that are necessary, you need space in these cars in front of your competition in order to, you know, to get the best result for your race. And unfortunately for them, they haven't done it at all this year. I think Bottas out qualified everybody once in that pack. So frustrating for them. Not a track that produces great overtaking. And unfortunately just got stuck in a train and didn't really matter what they did strategy-wise. It played out the way the race was always going to play out. And as for the team and who gets contracts moving forward, who knows? It's up in the air for me. They've signed Hulk. We had that conversation last week. Joe's probably gone. Valtteri's probably seeing him at the end of the career. He may go back to Williams, help them for a year before they bring someone young up, but there's too many options outside of the grid looking to move up into the category to probably justify or warrant that transition back to Williams. So who knows? We've just got to enjoy seeing VB on the grid and doing what he does at the moment.
I think he'll be on the grid next year. I think he'll replace Kevin Magnussen and be alongside Ollie Behrman at HAAS. Alpine now, Freya. Finally, a little bit of a glimpse for them in terms of coming off their first points finish of the year out of Miami for Ocon. Gasly qualified 15th, finished 16th, was frustrated with the team. Ocon qualified 12th and finished in 14th. Bruno Faman was on the pit wall for the Sky broadcast, so it was nice to hear someone a little bit different than Zach Brown and Christian Horner.
Yeah, for sure. There was some, and we actually have some French people in our Discord who were saying, wait a second, I'm French and I still can't understand what you're saying. But hey, I appreciated the different voice. Like you said, we do have the usual suspects who keep being very happy to hear their own voice whenever it is available to jump in on the mic. Look, I think with Alpine, like, yeah, sure, they are, maybe we're seeing some glimpses there, but it's still nothing to get excited about. I don't think Ocon had a few moves here and there. As you said, Gasly's very frustrated by the team, and fair enough too. There's, to me, a couple of points or whatever it was in Miami is not something to suggest that they're kind of out of the woods when it comes to their development. And you see the upgrades everybody else is bringing at every single team basically this weekend, and there was just not much to see from them. So I think at the start of the season, we say, it's a long season, give them time, they'll figure it out. But now we're over a quarter of the way through, and you would hope that they take some big steps over the next couple of races because they're just in no man's land.
Let's talk about HAAS now. Nico Hülkenberg was mega through qualifying. His one-lap pace for a man who's never driven at Imola, even though he's been in Formula One since 1957, seems ridiculous to me. But he qualified 10th, finished 11th, got a great jump on the RBs and managed to then hold them up a little bit. Kevin Magnussen managed to keep his nose clean. Of course, there's many, many penalty points now against his license, especially after Miami. And Io Komatsu, the team principal, was at pains to remind everyone in the, I think it was the press conference on Friday from the team's point of view, that he had conversations with Kevin. Yes, I would hope that you had about that.
Not angry, I'm just disappointed.
Yeah, but HAAS, though, do seem to be pretty racy, Campy. And, okay, one lap pace is good for Hülkenberg. But even at the end, we saw the fact that K-Mag was able to hunt down, I think it was something like a 13-second gap, hunted Ricciardo down and then took him the last couple of laps to get past. So there is some pace in this car for both of these drivers.
Yeah, I think strategy played into that ability for K-Mag to hunt down Danny Rick. They pitted on lap 12 or something, the dumbest strategy of all time. But we'll get there. Hey, super impressed with Hulk. I think he put it on P1 at one stage in qualifying, and we're all going, geez, how good is this? Hulk has performed consistently all year in qualifying. It is not unreasonable to suggest that he will be in Q3 in most Grand Prix weekends. So it's good to see. He got the start. He pulls these starts out of nowhere, and he picked up 2 positions, I think, got in front of both of his competitors that he needed to get in front of, and he controlled the race until the first pit stop phase, really, and the both Danny Rick and Yuki Tsunoda went the undercut, and that probably ruined his race a bit. If he had stayed in front during that phase of the Grand Prix, I think he would have gone on to secure that 10th place. But genuine pace in that car, and for Hulk, his stocks just continue to climb in this sport at the moment, and he's going to Audi, which we know, which is super exciting for him. As for K-Mag, look, I think he will say that. Well, he has said that he got unlucky in qualifying, being blocked by our boy Oscar Piastri, and I think he probably lost some aero wash through that chicane, but I still think Oscar was out of the way enough that he could have continued on his lap, but he decided to milk it, in my opinion. So he didn't. His qualifying result wasn't that great, but look, he's still got something to offer in this sport, and it wouldn't surprise me if HAAS keep him on with a VB next year or something, just to continue the development of that car. Because I think teams really like to see some continuation of drivers. I don't think they like 2 new drivers going into a team. So, anyway.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I mean, this is a car that has looked so much better this year compared to previous iterations of it. And that's what we want to see. We want to see this mid-pack start to actually develop some good racing. And Hülkenberg is the one and really Tsunoda, the two that are really being able to deliver that into the top 10 at the moment. Aston Martin, Freya. It was really lovely that Fernando Alonso managed to get an Emilia-Romagna test over the last couple of days. Good for him. Many upgrades. Basically, the whole car was upgraded to not suit this circuit, it seems.
Yeah, so Aston were on split strategies this weekend. So like you said, obviously they wouldn't have wanted this to be the experience, but in the outcome, it was basically a giant test session because of the changes that they've made to the car, but also the split strategies between the two cars. So they had two completely different setups. So they're going to get a whole lot of information, and they should learn a lot based on how Lance's car was set up in comparison to Alonso's. He said that afterwards, that should give them a lot of information. But it did seem like one of those weekends where he said, right, I'm just going to take one for the team and let's see what we can learn, which we saw Lewis Hamilton doing with Mercedes a couple of years ago. I was thinking about, I think it's the Montreal race where, Lewis was right down the back and they were just changing tyres, doing this, doing that. And it's a data gathering session in the end. And he kind of took one for the team and let George go racing because he was already compromised in one way or another. And I think that's what was happening this weekend. It's just every week we watch it and there's this big question mark in front of Stroll. And I'm like, you're fine, but you're not good enough for a seat. I just, you're a mediocre driver, and I just think there's so many more interesting drivers that could be on the grid.
Yeah, the hot take there is that everyone is saying that, including Campy's favourite video, apparently. RB, all right, let's gather around and talk about RB. Yuki Tsunoda had phenomenal one-lap pace at Imola, and it was genuinely impressive. Although for Q3, couldn't put it together, to put it in his own words, and he was disappointed. He ended up qualifying 7th. Danny Rick ended up qualifying 9th after really struggling with balance the whole weekend. He finished outside the points in 13th. Tsunoda finished in 10th, so another point for RB. They're all valuable at this time. And, again, they're also in the middle of nowhere in the championship discussion from a constructor's point of view, with Aston Martin ahead of them. So potentially, because of the Stroll deficit to Aston Martin, if DR and Yuki can, for the next round and then all the rounds after, start getting double points, Campy, then potentially it'd be a good thing. But it is nice to see this car at its home track with many of the workers for RB, many of whom suffered with the flooding last year, getting together, having some special moments, even though there was a sea of red. It just felt good for that to all happen and for Yuki to score a point here too.
Oh, I think for the team, it was a cracking weekend. Yuki's one-lap pace all weekend, he was on it. It's like he jumped in that car and it did everything that he wanted it to. He could drive it harder. He could put it in places that Danny Rick just couldn't this weekend. And in saying that, I think Danny Rick's qualifying performance, considering how far back he was at times on the weekend, he dragged himself into Q3 and put a lap. I think it was 2.5 tenths difference between the two of them. But they would be wrapped. Both cars in Q3 didn't nail the strategy for me. I think pitting on lap 12 to get, the undercut, it compromised the race at the back end. And they probably should have held it for another 5 or 6 laps. But they were the team that once they pitted, that triggered everybody else to do the same thing to cover off. So unfortunate for them that, they only got the 1 point from the weekend. I think they probably showed a lot more pace, but they probably needed some events to happen further up the grid in order to project themselves. We've seen the results where Danny Rick's been 4th and Yuki's got some 5th and 6th and 7th this year, that things have happened a bit further up the grid, or cars that should be ahead of them, which has projected them. They've put themselves in that 9th, 10th position, but it's projected them a few positions up. This weekend, it didn't play out. I think they'd be disappointed that they didn't get a double points finish, but hey, it is what it is. They've got some pace, but they are right there with HAAS. And this track, unfortunately, I think the last time we raced here, the DRS was super overpowered. I think they've shortened the zone. That's just going off my memory. Someone fact check me. But I don't think it was powerful enough this weekend. I think we saw with Oscar and Carlos and those battles. And even, once the leaders came through and lapped the pack, that threw out the rhythm of that battle between Tsunoda, Hulkenberg, Danny Rick and K-Mag, those 4 cars. So I think we may have seen some different effects if slightly the track was changed. But overall, good weekend. And what do we go to? Monaco next? Is that what's up next? Next weekend, Indy 500 weekend too. So that's exciting. That's just going to be a Sunday night of heavenly motorsport. And I think this is Danny Rick's track, Monaco. So I'm expecting a top 5.
Don't you bloody curse him.
Yeah.
Don't you bloody say anything. How
Top
dare
5
you?
on the
Show some
podium
respect.
for our boy.
Enough from you. Freya, both RBs had terrible starts. They both said after the race, we did everything right. The starts felt good. So there's probably something in the car then that they both struggled with. Campy's point about Yuki being able to put it where Daniel couldn't was, for me, absolutely seen when he overtook Logan Sargent at one of the points on the track where hardly anyone else was doing it. And then Hulkenberg went, oh, okay, I'll do that the next lap as well, and did. And I was like, oh, it's fantastic to watch. And clearly just Daniel couldn't understand the car. And it is one of the things Campy has said many times is it's frustrating to watch Daniel's starts because they're never good enough. They're never aggressive enough. We talk about him being last of the late breaker and everything else, but you need to be in it to win it for that kind of thing. And he said after the race, losing those 2 positions, Hulkenberg, Perez, immediately ruined any chance for him to get into the points.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting, like you said, with Yuki, what we are seeing is that he's just driving with real confidence. Like you said, I think it's yes, your ability to put that car in that position on track, but it's the confidence that it's going to behave in the way that you think it's going to when you get there. And that is something that to me just says how comfortable he is in that car. And we saw it at a few moments in particular, like you said, the overtake on Sargent, but also when he just done his outlap and then somebody else was coming out from the pit lanes. Somebody tell me who it was. Can't remember. And you had these 2 coming together right at that pit exit. And I was kind of sitting on the edge of my seat, and he just held that racing line with total confidence. And that's not something we've seen. Yes, I think so. He was exiting the pit, and Yuki just absolutely planted it, stuck to his guns. And that, to me, that's confident driving. It's not reckless driving. It's confidence. And that's not something we've always seen with him, that without a side of anger and frustration. Now, I know that I said 3 or 4 races ago, let's not over talk what Yuki has achieved, because well done, you've done 3 races without losing your temper. Now that we're starting to see that a few laps down the track, like a few races down the calendar, okay, let's start acknowledging that, because it does seem like a genuine improvement. And I know we don't always get to hear all the team radios and see the whole picture, but certainly from the information we do have, it sounds like that's something. And he was joking afterwards on the kind of post-race show about his temper a little bit and stuff. So he knows, and just hopefully it doesn't catch him out in a moment when he needs it. Like you said, that start was like both of them lost places, and as you said, Danny Rick was saying, you usually know when it's your fault. If you've completely dumped the clutch and it hasn't worked, you know when it's you. And I'll acknowledge it when when I do it wrong, but it didn't feel like that at all. And like you said, with both cars having the same thing, that says to me there's something about how they're setting up the car, or the car generally speaking, because that paired with Campy's point about DR not being a great starter, just not a combination that we need when you've got to maximize that first lap in order to be able to race with the people who you want to race against up the front.
Yeah, I completely agree with both of you for that. Let's talk about Mercedes now, because there is a phrase that I think is being said around the factory time and time again, and that phrase is no man's land, because both drivers in individual media pen interviews with Sky both said it. George Russell, he ended up qualifying in 6th and then finishing in 7th. Hamilton qualified in 8th, finished in 6th. Of course, Campy, there was that little switcheroo, can say that because Crofty wasn't here this weekend to ruin it for everyone. At the end for the team to score an extra point by getting fastest lap of the race. But otherwise, they really were just in the middle of nowhere.
Look, coming from a team perspective, I don't think Russell could be frustrated with that. The team got an extra point in the constructors, which they will need absolutely every single one of them this year, and it was the right thing to do. The reality is, if Hamilton had pitted, he would have come out behind Perez, probably would have passed him, but you don't want to take that risk. So I don't think Russell's seat in that or in that organisation is being questioned at all. Look, they are in no man's land, and they are not competitive with. They are more competitive than the cars behind them, but they are nowhere near the cars in front of them. And it seems like the Ferraris, the Red Bulls, and the McLarens have made a jump on them this season, which is that gap's insurmountable this year. They've got to go back to square one in the team and their design philosophy and come out next year and put something on track and then build from that. We've seen them since they have stopped winning world championships. They've consistently dropped back by 0.2 a year, and we're now 4 years down the track, and Max will win his 4th world championship this year. You know, it's a second a lap slower than everybody else, the direct competitors where they should be, and it's not good to see from that organisation. My question is what does Toto Wolff do now? He's proved that he can produce one of the greatest racing teams that we've ever seen. Does he have the fire in the belly to do that again? Or does he just sort of fade back in the organisation, doesn't take a role, and, you know, he still owns the team, so he'll have something to do with it. But does he is that fire in the belly to do it? They've lost personnel, they're losing arguably one of the greatest drivers of all time. Who do you get behind to rebuild this organisation and win world championships again? They've got to get a driver, which is like Lewis. But, yeah, they're in no man's land. So some big decisions happen there, and I think off track we will see some major changes coming up.
James Allison, who is the technical director there, the equivalent of Adrian Newey at Red Bull Racing, did say, yeah, okay, we're losing some people, but we are also hiring too. Well, yes, you need to because you're losing people. That's how that works. Ferrari, Freya Brosma. Carlos Sainz qualified 5th, started 4th for the reason of Oscar Piastri's penalty and 3-place grid drop. Ended up finishing in 5th. Charles Leclerc, 4th, and then ended up starting in 3rd. Finished in 3rd. Both drivers saying afterwards that they feel like it was overhyped after qualifying, I should say, especially Carlos Sainz. Like, you know, we talked about these upgrades, about closing a Red Bull. It's totally overhyped. Like, we were never, ever expecting to be within that space with them here. This is about the simulation. Sainz said that he was not happy with his race pace. Charles Leclerc said he was happy with his race pace. And Leclerc said, it's not so much that McLaren are faster than us, but track position here is key, which I thought was very interesting from his point.
Yeah, it's not, you know, we're going from this track to another one where track position is once again key. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with Ferrari, because we're not necessarily going to see the best that those upgrades can do next weekend either. You know, it could be another couple of races before we really see what they will, you know, what value they add to the car in terms of their race pace or their 1-lap pace, whatever it might be. So, look, I think it's an interesting one. It's funny, I've got a few notes here about all the different teams. I didn't actually have that many notes about them this weekend, which is interesting because they were in it the whole time, and yet it didn't feel like they were at the heart of the story. It was kind of what's going on with the McLarens or the RBs, and that I think is actually also reflected in their comments afterwards in terms of going, it felt okay. You know, it wasn't the best they've had, but also not the worst they had. And in this track, it doesn't maximise, you know, the advantages that they do have in their car as well. But yeah, I think it's going to be another couple of races before we see where that car is actually at in terms of race pace in comparison to McLaren. Because like you said, now with them starting ahead here, and if depending on what their 1-lap pace is like next weekend, the same thing could happen. So it could take a while to see where they stack up against McLaren and even the Red Bulls as well. But I think it was really great even to have one red team on the podium for Tifosi, obviously, and it was a sea of red, and that was including the red flares. Everyone there obviously has terrible, terrible health, as the race organisers would remind us. And that's obviously great. And just to stay on that point for a minute, I was expecting, especially from Sky, and to be fair, I didn't tune into the whole weekend, so maybe there was something that I missed, but I was expecting some kind of nice kind of look back at the year and the town kind of rebuilding and coming together, and maybe doing a bit of a feature with RB, with their, you know, as the local kind of team. And I just thought that would have been a really lovely narrative to kind of thread into the kind of pre and post race production. And I didn't really see so much of that. It was kind of referenced here and there, but not as much as I thought. So that was interesting.
Yeah, it's difficult though, isn't it? Because it's 30 years since Roland Ayrton's passed away, and I think they
True.
put their energy into that.
Yeah,
It's
that's
tough.
fair.
At least there was. I agree. I mean, why not have both?
Yeah.
Let's all just go out and get some old El Paso together, shall we? You mentioned McLaren, Frey. Let's talk about them now. Oscar Piastri, stunning. To quote Ted Kravitz, the only not unhinged thing he said, it's pole in spirit or whatever he said, without a toe.
Honorary pole.
Honorary pole, thank you, yes. Because he didn't have a toe from Hulk, and his pace was phenomenal. Of course, he has all the upgrades now, like his teammate Lando Norris. 3-place grid penalty, as we said early days here for this episode. Is it Tom Stallard's fault? Yes. Should he get a 3-place grid penalty for, I don't know. Yes, it's interesting. Daniel Ricciardo ended up getting a €5,000 fine for impeding, I think, at some point over the weekend. So monetary fines could be applied, but of course it's qualifying and you have to placate other drivers, even though hilariously it was K-Mag coming out of last week. Anyway, so for that point of view, I think this is really good news, everyone, because McLaren are starting to get some confidence. Freya, you mentioned that word just before. Oscar Piastri, consummate professional. He's the consummate professional on the grid now that Seb is no longer there, although Seb is still there, sometimes running in the rain, doing tributes for Senna as well. But this organisation, it's had some weird up and downs in the last 12 months. It's not time yet, everyone, to start calling this a championship battle because there's still 60 points between Lando Norris and Max Verstappen. But in saying that, this is a good development path for Papaya and for both of these drivers, Freya.
Definitely. And you think about other teams who are, also in this development race, who are not bringing the upgrades and having them fully understood and translating to race pace as quickly as these guys are. And that says to me, you've got the right people trying to solve the problems, and you've also got your processes down pat as well. Because I think sometimes you get these situations where one person is working on it, or one team or area within a business is working on it, but it can't translate to the output because you haven't got your communications right, or your processes aren't there, or you haven't tested it effectively, even though your idea is there. And so to have this step forward so quickly says more than just we are moving in the right direction. It talks to you about how the organisation is potentially more in sync with how they're actually going about things. So I think it's really, really positive. It was so tough with Oscar. This is just, it's the same at every track, but particularly some more than others, where you push for 2 laps and then your tyres completely fall away and you lose so much pace so quickly after following so closely and trying to battle for a couple of laps, which obviously, happened to him kind of at various points throughout the race, but obviously in the middle there as well. And so it was tough for him because it feels like he can smell the podium every single weekend, and he's just, either had some bad luck this weekend, obviously with the penalty and some other things as well. But he, again, like you said, consummate professional, he also acknowledges that there's a couple of areas within his driving that he needs to work on as well. So he said that in his interview after this race. He said there's a couple of things that I could have improved on. And again, that accountability as a driver, to me, that just speaks absolute volumes in terms of, again, your role within the team. And also you imagine the quality of the feedback that he must be able to give if he's able to say, no, that was me and the way I drove it, as opposed to this in terms of how I thought the car would behave and didn't. And that is something we might be able to change with a setup or whatever it might be. So I think just every weekend we do learn more about him and how he drives and how he works with the team. And it's fantastic to see. And look, it's interesting with Norris, like it was all too little too late, I think, with this race. Like all of a sudden he could see the opportunity and went for it. And I was like, needed to happen kind of 4 laps ago. It was just too little too late, I think, with that. And but what was really cool to see was Max respond. And it's just, as you said in Discord, it's good for the sport, whatever you may say, Ross, and I do share the sentiment with you. To see Max have to race is really good because we saw him respond. Even when he had, he said that he had felt like he had no grip, that he was ice skating by that point as well. And we got some great racing and it was really exciting. And like I said, too little, too late for Lord Lando. But Oscar, his first win is in a proper race is so close.
Campy, yeah, look, it's interesting because I think I get your point about too little too late for Lando, but I actually just don't think his tyres are in a position for him to push, and then suddenly they were. There was like an evolution in the deg where suddenly he had that grip and he was pushing. You could hear on the radio he was hurting, like genuinely. I know last week anyway, there was a lot of commentary about Lando Norris, but the guy can drive and he was pushing incredibly hard, and I enjoy seeing that. But Max was also pushing incredibly hard because he was getting grumpy with GP. And when he gets grumpy with GP, you know he's under pressure. And it was genuinely good to see. It's good for the sport. It's interesting to watch at 2 o'clock in the morning when that's starting to happen and that gap closing. Yeah, he said, okay, I need to do a couple more laps to do it. Getting up to the back of Max Verstappen is one thing. Passing him is something completely different. I said, I think in the Discord at one point, hey, we may have a Monza type situation where the championship leaders take each other out, and Charles Leclerc would have sailed through for a very emotional home victory, and Oscar would have come in second. But Campy, you mentioned the DRS zones. You were absolutely right. They've been shortened this year. Oscar afterwards said he was bored this race because they just weren't long enough. He was able to hang on the back of Carlos for ages and ages. So clearly also, not only is he learning how to tyre manage, I think, a little bit more, but the car's probably getting a little bit kinder on tyres too, which is obviously an incredibly important part of Formula One racing.
Yeah, if you think back 12 months ago where this team was, they were absolutely nowhere, and we were promised upgrades at the mid-season break, which would bring on, on-track performance, which we were all sceptical of. Fast forward, I dare say that this team is going to win 4 or 5 races this year, straight up against the Red Bulls, and they'll need some luck in order for that to happen too. And I think Oscar's probably primed to be the guy to do it. Lando's getting the luck at the moment, luck of the draw last 2 weeks, just through situations that are out of his control. But I'm genuinely excited for Oscar. I think he'll be a world champion one day. I think he's got the temperament and he's still learning. This guy hasn't even driven 50 races yet. Not even, he's just ticked over 30, not even. So his progression in this sport and his upward curve of trajectory of learning is huge. Whereas Lando is probably at the top of his game at the moment. He can still get those, the experience in races, which will allow him to get results at times. But, geez, the upside for Oscar is massive. And he'll have a weekend this year where he puts it all together and luck goes his way. And, dare I say, he'll get his win. I predicted this year that he'd get his first win before Lando, and that didn't play out. But he's on the cusp, and he's genuinely going to be a superstar of over the next 15 years in this sport. So it's good to see from an Aussie fan point of view. And I'm looking forward to it. So
his fourth in a row. Third, fourth in a row. I've got my
you
things
reckon?
around.
You reckon Lando's? Do you think Lando is nervous behind closed doors about how good Piastri is going to be? I know Lando's got the team, and Zach Brown is his golden goose essentially. In the look, we know where they stand in their relationship, and it's been there for years. But do you think there's any, fear of looking over your shoulder from Lando about how good Oscar is going to be?
Not yet, I wouldn't have thought, but it's coming. And it's one of the things that I think that Zach is probably he's done a great job in terms of this driver pairing. And I was just about to say, looking at other driver pairings with top teams in that sort of top 5, it is the strongest, I think, because they're both going to be as consistent as they possibly can. But Lando, they're still so young. That's the problem. It's not like Lando is Daniel's age when Lando was Lando's age, where you're like, Oscar is younger again. But Freya, you're probably in a better position to answer that.
Yeah, I think he's swimming in confidence at the moment. I don't think he's too concerned about Oscar, to be honest. And like you said, he probably sees the potential that he has. And so maybe he knows that in a couple of years' time, they won't be talking about Oscar as the next big thing. He's going to be the big thing. He probably knows his potential, but I think knowing like you said, his relationship with Max and his standing within that team, and also having been so vocal about his commitment to the organisation long term That I'm sure will have come with conversations around we're going to get you as many wins as you can. I just think he's very safe at home in terms of his role within McLaren, and so I don't think he's for the time being. I don't think he's terribly nervous about it, rightly or wrongly.
Let's wrap up this part of the show. Campy, we can talk about more of that next week, shall we? Red Bull, Max Verstappen under pressure, finished first, qualified first, also qualified under pressure, was genuinely elated. Freya, I saw you in the Discord saying how good it was to hear him say that. And look, if you're a Daniel Ricciardo fan like us, okay, he didn't out-qualify his teammate, but he certainly out-qualified Sergio Perez. That's enough. More than enough, in fact, because it's Red Bull, qualified 11th. Shocking quali, and with some strategy and some cleaner air. And the fastest car on the grid managed to put it in 8th in the end. But overall, for Red Bull, I think it's going to be an interesting one, Freya, because we're talking about seats for next year. Sergio's in a rush. Christian's not. After Miami last year, he started not performing, and there were question marks over his seat at the end of the season. Here we are again.
Yep. Yeah. Well, having just said we're already a quarter of the way through the season, I'm now going to say it's a long season, everybody. So, look, they don't need to make a move anytime soon. Like, they're going to see how it plays out at least until the summer break. There's no need, given the kind of how disrupted that team has been this year because of all the news stories that we all know about, and obviously Newey. There's no reason for them to introduce another variable in terms of a new driver or even questioning it. And there's not enough reason to. This is one race. There's not enough reason to at this point. So I just think because of everything else that's going on surrounding that team at the moment, what they need to do is stabilize and just make everybody feel very confident, very comfortable in a very consistent environment, and making changes to their drivers or even bringing that into the question right now is not not in the best interests of the team or the individuals. And like you said, it was just fantastic to see Max actually push it. He had to work for that win, like you said. The way that Lando was able to push when he had his tires in the right window, it was fantastic to see. Like, having some jeopardy in terms of race winners each weekend is good for the sport. We're going to say it again. It might be the quote of the episode, I think.
Good.
But it is. Rather than us making our predictions, rather than us making our predictions and saying Max and then tossing up between 2 or 3 people for second and third, it'll be fantastic. It's good for everybody, and it's good for Max. Max has to go and actually work for it. It's good for him too. So yeah, I think it was actually really good to see. It doesn't matter what you think of the person who's pushing him or who it is. It's great.
Yeah, Campy. This is what's the bet, by the way? Here's what's going to fucking happen. Daniel Ricciardo will get into Red Bull and there'll be shit again. And then he will have missed the fucking window where they were actually world championship contenders.
That's what I'm nervous about.
I can just see that happening. But look, Perez is now going to be under pressure to perform. He has the capability of doing it, but he is just so far off Max all the time. I mean, there was 2 McLarens, 2 Ferraris at the front, and Perez was 11th. So there was no ability for Hannah, who does a fantastic job with strategy, to be able to put a driver pairing together as a team to work together, Campy.
Oh, when this car is clearly the best car on track, that is when Sergio will put it in your P2, P3 and get those results like they did earlier on in the year in the first few races. The reality is, when it's not the best car on the track, Max will find time and extract time in qualifying, get the results that he needs to win a world championship, but Perez is nowhere. And I dare say the gap between anyone on the grid in qualifying, the Perez-Verstappen gap, is probably the biggest. It is consistently 6 or 7 tenths every time I look at it. So Perez has got to go. And I think he's fulfilled the need that Red Bull needed. They couldn't not sign him as a driver at the time. He won that race when he was in the Racing Point from the back of the grid. He had some genuine pace, and he deserved that drive at the time. 3 years down the track, that's done and dusted. We need someone else in that car that we want to see. It will be Danny Rick next year, regardless of how Yuki Tsunoda performs against him, because Christian would prefer Danny Rick in that car to anybody else on the grid. And Yuki's not going on the top team. He may move sideways in his career, but in saying that, Max is just a superstar. That qualifying was one of the best qualifying sessions I've seen in a long time. And his ability to extract tenths out of a racetrack is just unbelievable, second to none. So excellent for them.
Yep. Welcome to 81.3 Lakeside Drive FM. Points if you figure out why it's that number. Yes, if you'd like to be part of the show, do that, because you can send through some voice notes like two wonderful people have. There's 4 in total because Hillary sent 3. But I've not listened to any of these yet. None of these have been vetted. So let's listen and let's react to Charlie, who is on the line first.
Hey guys, this is Charlie from Sydney. Really enjoy the podcast. And I think my biggest hot take is that I really think an Australian champion in Oscar will happen before Lando. Not with McLaren, but I really think Oscar will win a championship before Lando does. And then my last piece I just wanted to share, this isn't a personal gripe or a personal attack, but Campy, gotta breathe through your nose, mate. All the best, guys. And enjoy listening into the future. Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Charlie. This is my favourite part of the show already. This is my favourite part of the show already. Legend. Thank you, sir.
That's too good.
I will make a comment on the nose breathing because I haven't done it in a while. Look, if you look at a French bulldog and the breathing problems those dogs have, unfortunately, that is just how I was born and that is my makeup. I've had hundreds of surgeries to try and correct it and fix
Hundreds
it.
of surgeries.
The reality is I've had 5 surgeries, but
That's
the
a lot more than
reality
most.
is I have some severe structural issues behind my nose going to my mouth and my windpipes. I'm literally about to get a hole right here to fix it, like the old crake. So anyway, we'll leave it there.
That's so great.
Oh, that was one of the funniest
it's-
things. Thank you, Charlie, so much.
I knew it was coming too.
Oh,
It was
look,
the anticipation of who's it going to be? Who's it going to be?
it's
I've got
look,
one.
to be honest, I was
I've
going
got
to
a
say,
call in.
go
I
on,
was
Campy.
super excited to see Freya in a headband this morning, and I thought that was code for
I've got a call
Formula
into my own
Cold Ones
podcast.
3.0.
Goodness me. Oh, yeah, okay, yes. Fresh
Yeah,
off
you got
the
excited
yacht.
that it was going to mean something that it wasn't, unfortunately. Yeah, sorry about
Yeah.
that.
That's just, that was the last time, wasn't it? There was the beige headband when you were flying the
Yeah.
beige flag. Charlie, good point, though, about Oscar Piastri. What do we think about that, though, as the first champion ahead of Lando Norris, but not in that same car, Campy?
Yep. Absolutely. I'd said it before 5 minutes ago. This kid will be a world champion. Whether it's McLaren or another team, who knows? But he will be world champion at some stage.
Yeah, just breathe through your nose, please. Freya?
I just love the fact that when someone opens going, this isn't a personal attack. it's going to be a personal attack.
I can't
So
wait for
funny.
someone to trash you and me as
No,
well.
it's going to happen and it's
It's
going to be
coming.
fantastic.
We all
It'll
suck
happen.
together.
Exactly.
You've got to
Campy's
learn
gonna
to
record
laugh
and
at
send
yourself.
Exactly. Campy's going to make sure that happens if it doesn't happen from somebody else.
Hello, my
I
name is
believe
Mr.
it.
Burns.
Boo earns.
Yeah, Charlie, that was mega. Very good.
Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right,
no,
let's keep
completely
going.
agree. Oscar's a world champion.
Let's keep going. Hillary, there's 3 from you. Maybe we'll play all of them and let's see what happens.
Hello, this is Hillary, first-time caller, long-time listener
I love that.
from America here. And my Hills hot take is that Lando's going to have a DNF this weekend. Like, coming off this win, his ego is already slightly insufferable, as are the egos of the rest of the British media. And I think we're also going to get an announcement, possibly, regarding Ferrari. Or one of the other Italian-based teams and Adrian Newey's 2026 plans. So those are my hot takes.
Yeah, okay. So let's keep going. Hillary, is still on the line? Hillary, can you hear us? Oh, there she
Another
is.
follow-up to my first Hills hot take of Lando
Coined already.
not finishing. Do we think we would actually hear like Crofty cry on the broadcast and like cry through the two sexed head team radio if Lando DNFs, because I think that might happen, and it might be the first time where it wasn't like an actual tragedy occurring or like grave injury occurring where broadcasters cry on air if Lando doesn't do well following his win. Again, Hillary from the US with a Hills hot take.
That's right, Hillary. Don't sign off because you're still on the
The
line.
Hills hot take.
They get coined already.
I'm loving this. It's my
Hi,
favorite.
me again, Hillary,
Hillary.
USA.
Thanks for calling.
Do we think with
What a
Seb
voice.
being there,
Sign
one,
her
I
up.
think it's so adorable that he organized a track run in honor of, you know, our two legends who passed at Imola. But do we think that he's also there because he's going to be like replacing Helmut Marko at RB / within the Red Bull organization and like taking care of the young drivers given all the controversy, and then like Max just like ups and quits? This is just me, you know, being chaotic at this point. Hopefully
Same.
chaotic good.
Good on you, Hillary.
What we
Thanks very
love,
much.
mate.
A long-time listener and absolute legend
Great contributor.
of this podcast. If you want to get involved, you can do this as well. You can go to our website. You can use your phone. You can use a laptop. Anything with a microphone, you can record. Freya, Hillary had some great points. Absolutely great points there.
I think we're definitely going to see Seb back in F1 and before too long, to be honest. He is, as much as he was like, you know, I've got a life outside of Formula One, so I'll never say never, but, you know, I've got other things that I'm passionate about that I'm going to pursue. He's just kind of always been like in the bushes lurking, whether he's like, ignore me, I'm just here picking up litter. And what are you talking about? I don't watch Formula One. And then this one, he's like, I'm just organising a track run. What are you talking about? Oh, there's a race on this weekend. Fantastic. He's just kind of like suspiciously lurking around. So I do think that he will be back in Formula One in the next year or two. As to which team and what role, obviously he has his history with the Red Bull organisation, but I think the events of something like this year, unless a Horner, for example, goes, I'm not sure he's going to, like the Seb in his current state, very values driven, very open about his political views and all of those types of things. I'm not sure he's going to fit well in an organisation like that currently as it stands at the moment. So I think it would have to be because some of those people have left that he says, right, I'm going to come in there and, you know, sprinkle the Seb magic dust now. But yeah, I think while they're still there, I'm not sure it would be a great fit, but he'll be back.
That was great. If you want to send your hot takes in, do it, because
So
that
good.
was great. Let's go now to our fantasy team name competition. Found some names. This is it's already my favorite of the year. I think it's from Steen N. More on podcast. More space rather on. More on podcast. Yes, that is us. 2 more rounds. DRSP swap. Jason C. Copy. We aren't checking. Angus H. John. Hi, John. From Miami, James Val movement. That was very good. Wham Bam, Barrier Dan, Rebecca Murden. That was obviously a Japanese reference. Tim, time rather to go inventing. Bethany Lean. James gets wine drunk. Nicholas H. Yes,
Very
often.
good.
Daniel Ricciardo Horner, Becky Everest. Yes, that is why he's ending up to be in Red Bull, because the team principal captain's call. Our rankings for the fantasy for this round, although there's still provisional points because apparently the track data wasn't collating correctly or whatever. Anyway, I'm 24th for this round. Campy, you were 25th, equal 25th with a few of the listeners. And Freya, you were 52nd. So not
I
too
can't tell you
bad.
last time I looked at my team.
Oh, here we go. Here come the
I
excuses.
logged on. This website's so bad. I logged on once and can't get back on since. So there you go.
You can't get into your own computer half the time, so that really
That's
doesn't
right. Congratulations, Daniel Blackman, who is
Very good.
provisionally in first with Valkyrie Bottas. You had Verstappen ×2, Bottas, Tsunoda, Sargent, Hulkenberg, Ferrari, and McLaren. Rock and Stroll, Anthony Barden second, and Lindley team 3 with Lindley Collier in third. Well, that's it. Thanks very much for your company for this episode and for being involved in the show. It's awesome to have your voices. Please, I'm going to keep saying it. Get involved. Leave us, call into the show. 81.3 FM Lakeside Drive. Do yourself a favour because we bloody love it. Also do yourself a favour by heading over to watch us on YouTube. If you haven't already, please subscribe over there. You can leave us a rating review if you enjoyed it. To get involved with the conversation on a more regular basis, our Discord server is there waiting for you with Ross. Ross is just waiting there for you, actually, and TillyWilly13. It's the most active people in there. You can find us on any social media platform you want. Now, Monaco, days away, which is very exciting. So we will be with you again this time next week to review the Monaco qualifying and Indy 500 race, because the qualifying will end up being the race result. Campy, thank you to you.
Thank you.
Freya, thank you to you as well.
You're welcome.
And we'll see you this time next week for another episode of the Lakeside Drive F1 podcast. See ya.